Hello and welcome to another special episode of the Offside Museums podcast. My name is Oke Ndibe, and it's my delight to welcome you on behalf of my co-host Emeka Onyagwa. Today we're going to be x-raying developing events in Kenya where the masses, especially youth, are having something akin to the NSAS movement, sort of the Kenyan version of the NSAS movement. Young people in Kenya, but also the mature adults, have taken to the streets and they have stormed the parliament to protest just the hardship in the country and the recent legislation that is in progress that will raise taxes in the country. So we're going to look at all of that and see particularly how perhaps the experience of Kenya might inform also possible developments in Nigeria, which is facing at minimum times that are just as difficult as what the poor in Kenya are going through. So it's my delight to welcome you to this bracing, what I expect to be bracing conversations. So Emeka, I know that you have some Kenyan friends, as I do, and this has been brewing for a while. And in a sense, what's happened is that the people in Kenya are caught between, as they say, a rock and a hard place. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, is saying to the Kenyan government that it must cut the deficits of public spending, and that it should cut its investments in public, what I'll call social programs, in order to qualify to receive further loans from the IMF and from other international agencies. Meanwhile, the people of Kenya feel that already they have paid a price that is already steep. You know, things are difficult. The prices of foodstuff and of services have spiked in recent years. The president, William Ruto, rode to power on a kind of expectation and promise to soften the social economic conditions for the people in Kenya. But he himself has been caught, I think, in this dilemma that in order to do that, you need some international investment, international funding, and then you face these demands by the IMF and other lending agencies that the government must tighten the screws on its expenditure. Well, in a lot of ways, Nigeria is in a similar bind, and I will say that given even the much larger population in Nigeria, that perhaps Nigeria is in a much worse bind. But so we see these demonstrations spill out on the streets. A few days ago, the president of Kenya, Ruto, was at a church event and had to be quickly evacuated because a mob arrived of protesters who were not happy to see their president. And then just in the last few hours, we know that protesters stormed the parliament in Nairobi, that they set a part of the parliament on fire. We know that the police, from press reports, have shot protesters, and reports of casualties range from anything from 5 to more than a dozen, and dozens of people who are injured, from slight injuries to really life-threatening injuries as well. So these are my opening, not quite thoughts yet, but sort of setting out what I see as the unfolding situation in the country of Kenya. So,
Yeah. It is very interesting just from a distance. I haven't really delved much into it. It's obviously a lot more complex than all that. Um, you'd learn more from friends and other things as well. It's just for me, maybe the similarities with Nigeria, but the much I know at least are things like the reality that one, you had a very contested elections last time. So you had a Ruto who had been in government for 10 years prior, leaving and going to the other party. Not just when I say in government, I mean like at the federal level in the same party with the what they call this person, the previous
Uhuru Kenyatta.
Uhuru as well, and leaving and forming his own party and all that. And there's also a lot of things saying that he's going to be the one to fix what the previous government had damaged. And there's knowing from my friends, there's a lot of taxation, especially on foreign things. Very similar to Nigeria. Just the similarities with Nigeria in terms of that. I don't know their current economic situation. I know what's happening in Nigeria because obviously I have deeper connections there. So it is interesting overall. There was also the it doesn't escape in Africa. When we get here, we act like we're all saints, but it doesn't escape in Africa. There's also the ethnic connotations then in Kenya, where I've forgotten the Luo person that should have won, who had a cleaner record in public service than Ruto. And people celebrated when Ruto won. There were good aspects to their elections and their elections adjudications where the court process was really quick. It was largely televised and all that. But Ruto, by and large, was part of the same government that led them down this whole path in the first place. He just seemed to go to another path and all that. People make fun of it. So you have a Ruto who has come in, who is more legitimate than the Nigerian president by any stretch of the imagination, has the rubber stamp of what, quote unquote, what people would call, not me, they like using this term, but the Western powers. So Ruto is all in on anything the Western powers want. You want soldiers for Ukraine? We are your back. You want support for the genocide
Haiti.
in Israel? Every other person is nonsensical. Ruto is there. Haiti will be the blackface to the imperialism in Haiti. Ruto is there. Ruto is anywhere, everywhere in what they say. I say he has the stamp of approval with them. So it's very interesting stuff. Like I said, I've forgotten the person's name. Is it she or he? It's from a Luo guy, who is the Luos are a large group who have never. So you have the Kalenjanis and the Kukuyus who have alternated power largely. Well, yeah, alternated. I think it's a good way. They've alternated power largely to the demise of Kenyan society, right? Largely. You also have other groups and even groups from outside. So, like I said, I haven't, there's a whole bunch of things going on there in Kenya. And I've forgotten the person in question. The person was
Zig Odinga.
I think it's Odinga. I think
Riley
there's
Odinga.
Riley Odinga is a woman, if I'm not wrong.
No, it's a man.
Is he a man? Anyway, there was a Luo person that had more of a this thing in Kenya. Again, there's a whole bunch of it, so it's very interesting. It's just looking at it. I guess is a break from looking at Nigeria to some degree, but I don't. I think Nigeria is Nigeria is it's just the same things, the same microcosm in certain ways of what's happening in Kenya. The other similarities is also maybe the reason to start talking about it also is a lot of Nigerians have jumped into give the Kenyan Gen Zers, as it's called, So the Gen Zers are those born after, I believe, 96. No, sorry. Those born after, no, not 96. Those born after 98 till, I think, about 2010, maybe. That'd be Gen Z, somewhere around that. I need to check. But the Gen Zers are leading the charge. Very young, active, some as young as 14, maybe even younger. If I check properly, they're leading the charge. So the Nigerians are jumping in with their own experiences about not letting down, what happened with them a couple of years ago with the Lekki toll gates, where they were told to keep quiet, shut up, and join the queue. So, and they joined the queue, and then they made sure that their queue didn't succeed almost entirely. Very few spots of their support really came through. And even to hold some of them accountable that they supported in Nigeria, it's not that easy. Luckily, they supported some good candidates who are doing fairly good jobs here and there, a few here and there. But overall, they were shut out, and they're still getting shut down by the older generation. I was watching Aisha Yusufu. She's become like one of my favorite people. She's become one of my favorite people, man. She was talking about herself being 50 and that they are the lost generation. That when they were, of course, in their generation. I know I'm a senior millennial, so prior to that, anyway. So when they were younger, they told them, the future is theirs. And now they are older. They're telling them, well, you guys, don't worry. The future is for the young people. Let's just finish it out. Which we the octogenarians. Let's finish this thing out. You guys don't need to worry yourselves. So for her, she was just saying like, look, man. What she was saying is, look, it doesn't. That's fine. Doesn't bug her. They are more or less a lost generation, which I kind of agree. I think so many people in that era, even with senior millennials, I think so many people in that era, senior millennials are people born after 81, I think, to probably 1990 will be the senior millennials, more 1990 maybe. Yeah, more senior millennials than the more junior millennials are probably after 1990 till like 97, 98 will be the more junior millennials. Anyway, so it's like, okay, a lot of these people are like a lost generation of people in terms of lost careers. Similar things happened in America. Actually, a lot of senior millennials, we came out during the financial crisis and all that. And we were made to sit down. We were made to believe that the wars, if you were in America, for instance, you were made to believe that the wars in this thing and all that were just wars, which they were not. America does not fight. Even at the end of World War II, thank God people are beginning to realize that the actions of America were not just in any way, shape, or form. It's good that some of the things that have happened have brought into those conversations in terms of those things that, transpired at the end of the war. Firebomb in Dresden, the use of nuclear bombs, all those things. There was no just reason to use them, to have those incidents. So anyway, you have a situation where Nigerians are jumping in and talking about that, which is very interesting just from my perspective and taking a look at. I don't know what's going to happen. You can see Ruto is a man with the global elites. He has the backing, their backing. He's been in government. It's very unlike Tinubu, that is an out and out convicted drug lord, which was the case in the Supreme Court, convicted of stealing elections, all that. So he does their bidding.
Well, he wasn't convicted. He was convicted. He apparently was convicted for drugs. At least he had to forfeit funds. But what I'm saying is that the Nigerian Supreme Court said he didn't rig elections, right? But we do know.
No, convicted for drug dealing in the US. I'm not in Nigeria. You can Nigeria. You can walk in the streets, and this is the truth. Kill anybody you feel like,
and if you have enough resources,
you are not going to be convicted. So there's not justice is for the elites. So if you're elite, you can do anything in Nigeria. So that's not. I don't count that as the United States federal court convicted Tinubu, which the Nigerian courts clearly said your bank account can be convicted, but not you.
But not you.
That's what that is their own judgment. No, this is not me. This is them. So how that can happen from a logical perspective, That's something that we should forward to people to use and do satirical things, right? So
Yeah.
it's a lot more different with Tinubu. Tinubu would do
Mhm.
what they say. Tinubu has implemented. I don't even know if he's even at this point in time. I think he's even lost with the amount of companies that have left Nigeria.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah,
more like the distance. So
I mean, you just brought up an important question. I think Shoprite just announced that as of June 30, so in a few days, that the Shoprite in Wuse Central Mall will be shuttered permanently. And in a statement, the company said that this owed to the company's financial situation and the current business climate in Nigeria, and so that this was the best move for them to make. So they are laying off all their staff, and they're saying, anybody who had any financial service obligations or relationship with the company, that relationship is going to end as of June in a few days, and it speaks to a certain climate in Nigeria since Tinubu took over. The flight of numerous multinational companies, including companies that have been in Nigeria for decades, as well as those that came in the late 1990s with the inauguration of the current democratic dispensation. So Nigeria has bled a lot of business opportunities through the flight of foreign investors, through the flight of companies, and so on. But let me return to Kenya briefly. So the reporter, young people are up in arms. Ruto, who had said the right things about correcting the structural ills of the economy, as you rightly said, has lent himself as an instrument of the global agenda. And it's something that we don't talk about enough. A certain global agenda that doesn't bode well. I'm very, very suspicious of it, even in America. But more so for the consequences for African countries. And we're seeing a bit of it, with this a stipulation that African countries have to reduce the imprint of their public expenditure in order to attract funds. There's another sort of sub-debate that is going on the side that I only recently began to pay attention to, which is a move to get African farmers to move from their organic crops to using genetically modified crops for farming. And what I understand is that if they make that transition, every year you will depend on, because these crops, you can't replant any part of it. So it's a once and all crop. So every year you have to go back to the original people who sort of hold the patent on those crops, whether it's tomato or whatever, to get new seeds that you plant. If this agenda passes, if given that, I've listened to some people who are describing this situation, then we're looking at a situation where the economic conditions in Africa, which are already grim, are simply going to become grave. I don't even know what grim and grave, which one is worse. But if people come to a point where they can't produce food in a self-sustaining way, then forget about even the price of goods and services that are imported, because on a pinch, you can say, okay, we're not going to consume these foreign-made goods and services, but we at least have some food to eat. Now, if you need to go abroad to acquire every year the seeds of genetically modified plants and other foods, then we are going to be in deep, in a much deeper mess than we are, and we are in a very deep mess as it is. So these youngsters have taken to the streets. They've paid with their lives. I suspect, that the police is going to actually increase the quotient of violence, that they will have marching orders to use greater violence, especially now that they've seen the resolve of young people to combat the policy direction of the current government in Kenya, much like what happened in Nigeria, that the NSAS movement took the ruling class by surprise, and they were actually close to caving to the original demands of the protesters. And once the protesters found that they actually had the misrulers of the country where they wanted them, they then began to make more demands. And I think that the ruling class in Nigeria then said, hey, we got to spill a lot of blood to tell these youngsters that we're not about to yield um, our privileges and our perks and so on. And so they massacred kids in Lagos and elsewhere. And very quietly, people went quiet, and the young kids only remobilized in the run up to the 2023 elections, when they coalesced around the Labour Party. They adopted P2B as sort of the embodiment of their new agenda. And of course, again, the ruling class at the level of politics, the police, the judiciary, the electoral commission in the country, made sure that they were sabotaged and they were frustrated. So that's where we are. And you see a certain post the elections of 2023, you see again the ruling class moving with the formula that is always guaranteed to work, which is to invoke the ethnic shibboleth, So you find the fragmentation along ethnic lines and somewhat along religious lines. That has happened in Nigeria. So that even as people are suffering in Nigeria, you see rogue actors like Reno Omokri and his fellow bandits, basically making this, giving the impression that Nigeria's major issue is the Igbo, so it's this ethnic thing, which is why a lot of us were particularly depressed when Wole Soyinka launched his recent attacks on P2B, because as I said in a previous episode, P2B is nowhere near the problems of Nigeria. We have an objective view of Tinubu and the way in which he has damaged the fabric of Nigeria, economically, morally, culturally. So to focus on P2B, to focus on the Igbo, and to make them into scapegoats is simply really objectionable.
It is I mean, you gotta switch to Nigeria, I guess, but just it is I was talking with a friend, and I'm like talking with a friend, and this friend of mine is uh, half Yoruba, half Hausa. I thought actually half Fulani. He just finished his PhD recently, and I was just trying to make the point to him that as long as you're going to live in a country, and I was trying to draw the reality to the numbers because somebody had asked me that question about the numbers of. I think I said that thing before. I had a friend that came to the house and all that, and they asked, well, a, a friend of ours came, the husband, and the husband was like, there were not that it matters anyway. To be honest, it's just I was just telling him like, well, I was delving into the numbers of which ethnic groups are more aware and all that. And anyway, anyway, um, there's so many stories like that. But I was just making this point to him like, at the end of the day, whether you don't have a solution to your problem, so you go in and you convince people that Mr. A from this ethnic group is your problem because oh yeah, they hang out together and they're all from this group. Or this what's up. It's not about what they're saying, right? It's about whether they hang out together and all that, or whether this or that. And I laugh because most of the people leading the charge don't even live in the country. Not all, but the majority of them don't live in the country. You live in the country, you all of a sudden have friends that you've had for a long time who now start looking at everything purely through tribal lenses. Yeah, you see, a lot of the people that lead the charge in the country are people who, I know, no offense to anybody, it's just the truth. Like you could name a whole bunch of them, people who are half of something, or they're actually married, not married to people from their ethnic group. These are the people that lead the charge. When I say the charge, I don't like. They are some of the most, So, and I say at the end of the day, even if you were to have a war in the mode of 1964 and all that, anybody that
You mean
on
67?
60, by 64, I said 64.
64, yeah.
Yeah, 64, 1964. Well, I mean, I pogrom starts, the thing starts in 63, 64. You start having Operation Wetia, all that. So anyway, let's say 63, 64, you start having all these crises all over the place, right? Even if you had to have all these things, the makeup of Nigeria, this is not, it's always very interesting. I don't know how to, it is, it doesn't bode well for you. It's not, it can't even be to the level of even that era. Like you don't have that kind of control of the Nigerian populace to gang up on any. You don't have like a united North. It doesn't exist. Even with the groups that they like to band together, which one of the biggest oxymorons in Nigeria is the Hausa Fulani nomenclature. I don't know why people keep using this thing. It is offensive to even themselves, right? In fact, one of the biggest debates today in the crisis is happening in Nigeria. When I say crisis, I mean just it's like all over the place, right? You have the move to unseat so quote unquote royal fathers, right? So Kano is one of them, where they are trying to unseat this thing. I know people don't want to talk about it and all that. But one of the biggest debates they have is Sanusi going to be who again, for those that listen that, so you have the Emirate Council in Kano. It's a long story. But part of that story is that council had existed for a very long time, maybe by some accounts, close to 1,000 years by some accounts. It doesn't matter how long it has existed. The reality is that it has existed almost entirely as an Hausa enclave. In fact, it was a matriarchal enclave prior to the coming of Danfodio. So all 7 Hausa places. Oh man, hold on. I'm just trying to describe it. So yeah, you have this situation where all the Emirates has been there, or what you might call the Emirates, but the leadership in Kano as a town has been there for a long time. Whatever the amount of time is, um, I leave it to them. I find Nigerian history is very interesting, almost entirely nonsensical. It doesn't matter where you go to. Everybody writes what they feel. No, that's why they like. Anyway, they actually have their own. So typically, in the last 100 years, you standardize a lot of things about written history and all that makes it make sense in an objective way. But African history has its own way of writing it separately. So very interesting stuff. Anyway, so but the point is that you have a situation where the argument now is so you've had this thing where prior to the coming of this thing was matriarchal. You have, for those that don't that wouldn't know, have realized, but I've heard the names. You've heard names like Queen Amina, who was in charge and all those kind of things before the coming of Danfodio. So Danfodio comes in and makes it a very different distance. So in essence, the Emirates now traces its lineage from Danfodio, which would make Sanusi the 16th emir. But if you trace it from what they call the founding, Sanusi will be the 66th emir. The problem is that the other 50 emirs will all be Hausas. And it will also include, I think it should know, well, Queen Amina was in Sazao. So there's a whole, the 7 Hausa kingdoms and all that. There's a whole debate on which one was more supreme and all that. That's a whole different conversation. But anyway, this thing be. So, oh man, you have a situation where, what's the point I was even trying to make? Sorry with that, this thing. You have a situation where, man,
Well, yeah, because you were talking that there is no homogeneous north or any,
oh yeah,
that
so we're talking
if
about,
we were to have
yeah,
a war or something.
so you're talking about a north where there's no homogeneity. You'd have to minus so many of these states from anything you're doing. They'll probably be against you and attack you and try and destroy you. You're looking at.
Then you were saying that when we talk about House of Fulani, that is a nonsensical.
It makes no.
category.
They'll probably in a war. You probably have the Hausas attacking the Fulanis to get back what they think, what they believe was taken from them in the early 19th century, right? And then that doesn't even count all the groups that you have in Plateau, Niger, Benue, that will all be ferociously against, like, nah, we're not going with you and all that. Then you come to the South and you have so many groups of people who are intermarried with each other, right? Long-term intermarried with each other. And you have a lot of them. You see somebody whose wife is Igbo being the most vile anti-Igbo person ever, whose mother is even Igbo. And you're sitting there, you're like, okay, so in a war, what do you think happens? This has played itself out in history. So, what do you think happens in a war? That doesn't bode well for you. So a lot of these things that people rile people up over, it's like you have a situation where if you fight a war purely over ethnic lines, which again, with Nigerian history and all that, your ethnic lines are really going to be starting from the lines of somewhere around 1850. That's where you try and draw together your ethnic lines and all that and say all of you are together. That doesn't bode well for anybody. You might fight a war and that's fine. But if you fight a war purely on ethnic lines, it is a very problematic situation. It's not, and if you think of some of the worst wars that we might know about in Europe, they were not, yeah, it's a whole different conversation. They were not even fought purely along ethnic lines. As much as people think what Hitler was trying to create with the Aryan race is all nonsensical. He was trying to create a 1890 this thing, which ended up really bloody, creating a certain Germanic tribe, which there are a bunch of, in fact, large parts of Europe are all Germanic tribes. FYI, if you want to talk of Austria, Netherlands, the list is endless. Denmark, a whole bunch of Germanic tribes. Yes, they are not just Scandinavians or Nordic people in this thing. There are a lot of Germanic tribes out there too. There are a lot of Germanic tribes all over. Anyway, so let me not go too far off. The point is that the history of purely trying to be an ethnic warrior in your thinking, in your policy, just to capture power, does not bode well. Especially given the numbers, you don't have a small number of people, no matter the numbers you put for Igbo people, no matter how you'd say Igbos or, whichever numbers, whichever ones. If you say some groups are not Igbos, the Igbo, not Igbo groups, you have at the bare minimum, you would have an ethnic group that would be the third largest by maybe 2 or 3 million less. And then when you add the rest, you're not even looking at maybe 2 or 3 million less. You're looking at probably the largest of them all, probably, if you add every single person that should be there, in quote and unquote. But let's assume you don't add that. So the point is that you have three large ethnic groups where if you pit them against each other, you have a lot of them that intermarried, a lot of them that are this, a lot of them are that. Even your own kingsmen. Today you have like Davido getting married, right? Davido's grandmother is Igbo. His mother, I don't think is even Yoruba either, right? His wife. So you expect somebody like that to be on your side or something like that in a war. People that keep pushing this kind of things, it's just like, I don't know where you think this ends up. If it ends up, this thing, but it's a ridiculous way to go about life. And you start seeing it sipping down, where you see people just, all they want to do in Nigeria is own the other ethnic group. Oh, we are the greatest. Oh, we are the best. Oh, we are this. Oh, we are all these nonsensical things. But anyway, so it's just funny to me. And that's where you have Nigeria right now. While you have people um, year after year for the last, God knows, I mean, for a slight blip during Obasanjo's period, maybe. But for year after year, you have a situation where the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, people can't afford these things. Middle class people are becoming far poorer, and the rich people are getting richer. The other day, I was hanging out with some lady. Well, I was hanging out at the barbecue, rather, and the lady was there. And I thought she lived in America. I was like, "Oh, you live out here?" And she's like, "No." I was like, "Ah, cool." And it wasn't just no; it was like an emphatic, like, "Oh no, I can never live here." Da, 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 da. I'm like, "Oh, okay." I didn't need all that emphatism in your. It's not like it's not personal. I was just conversing. I was listening to her. I was like, "Oh no, 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 cool." And then starts talking. And hey, Nigeria, she misses. I'm sure you guys miss hanging out with people. I say, yeah, to some degree, hanging out with people. But I said, "Where do you live?" Yeah, she was actually here with 5 of her kids. Three of her last kids were born here. She had one boy and 6 girls. Three of her last kids were born here. The boy was first. All of them went to school in Europe. So her daughter is doing culinary studies here. So she's been here for like a year or something, on and off. And I'm looking at her like, "Why are you here with your 5 kids?" I know, I don't, it's like, okay, you could do culinary school in Nigeria now. I mean, what's the point of coming here if you don't really like living here for a year? I start talking. I was like, "Okay, where do you live? You live on Queens. You live in Ikoyi. Let's put it that way. So you live in the bubble. You live in this bubble where you don't go out. And you think everything is great, and you're from Inewi, and you almost certainly you don't go there, judging even by the fact that kids looked more Americanized than my kids. But you don't go to Nigeria, but it's just an example of somebody who lives in a bubble. We talk about three of the people that brought largest amounts individually to fund Tinubu's campaign, right? They're all Igbos. Even if Wiki, I don't know if he will say is Igbo or not. I got no idea. You have to go ask them. But just from an objective standpoint, by the way, Wiki is Igbo, Elamulu is Igbo. I've forgotten the last person, I think. Elomalu is Igbo. That one does not straight up Igbo guy from Delta State, right? They all brought out money to fund the campaign, right? They're all there.
Is
They're all
that
part of.
official? Is it?
I mean, every report
Hmm.
has said that is the case, and they're talking about that being the case because Dangote was not enthusiastic about Tinubu in any way, shape, or form. So Dangote has gotten a cold shoulder, and if you read the report now, on and on and on, even though they talk about Dangote refinery coming on stream, which a lot of people say is probably not the case, they are saying the difficulties that Dangote is even facing is now even directly. In fact, at this point in time, the report is that Dangote is buying crude oil from America to refine in Nigeria. That's the report, right? Most of the reports I even saying that the refinery won't even be at 25% capacity till maybe 3 years time, at best 2-3 years time, somewhere around that. Depends on but they are trying to start working on, and even the little that they need, start rolling things out a little bit. They can't even get from Nigeria. So people point to the reality that Dangote has been trying to get audience with, but it's not
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And that's there. Those are, I believe those reports. I know how Nigeria works. I think it's 100% true. There's no doubt in it in my own mind. I don't. I mean, you either take the investigative journalists, people like David Hunde, for what they've written has come out to be accurate, or
Yeah.
you start questioning it if you want to, and that's fine. Which I'm sure there'll be a whole bunch of people who will. But I believe it 100%. That's the way Nigeria works. And these guys have access. They do what they want. They get what they want, how they want, while the rest of the people are fighting over tribal warfare. So
Yeah.
it's interesting stuff.
It's I mean, to return to Kenya, I do know that Kenya is also a multi-ethnic society, and as we know, some smaller ethnic groups have not featured in national leadership. I don't think that it has to do with the absence of political talent. I think that it's very much the ethnic factor playing out in that country. I doubt that it's as virulent as what we find in Nigeria, where some people are, on account of ethnic jingoism, willing to, cut their noses to spite their face, where some people feel if somebody who belongs to the same church as I do, or the same mosque as I do, or somebody who has shared the same language as I do, becomes president, senate president, speaker of the house, even if they're the most corrupt people in the world, even if they're absolutely incompetent. Some Nigerians sort of feel vicariously ennobled and empowered, that their own person is in power, even though this person doesn't know who they are. But it seems to me, my suspicion is that they 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 the audacious way in which the young people in Kenya have confronted the power structure in their country, we can't tell how that's going to progress going forward. As I said, I suspect that the state is going to mobilize violence in a decisive way, and the young people cannot compete in that regard, and so they are likely to beat a strategic retreat. But the point that I'm making is that my suspicion is that what's happening in Kenya is a multi-ethnic, multi-religious coalition of young people who have recognized, and I think I give it to young people, that a bunch of them, perhaps because of social media and so on, begin to group and arrange themselves around more noble ideals than the silliness of ethnicity, or the silliness of the primitiveness of tribe, or religious affiliation or something.
Tribal jingoism. That's what people like to use, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So I think that young people, the reason that often they're the hope of confused post-colonial states like Kenya, like Nigeria, is that they 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 create communities that are virtual, and virtual communities are more more suited to multi-element articulation rather than just one ethnicity or one religion. So that when you create a WhatsApp group, a Facebook group, an X group, because of their very nature. It's easier for people from different uh, cultural backgrounds, economic backgrounds to come together and to 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 be moved, if you like, by one agenda. So, if that happens to be the case in Kenya, and if the government doesn't succeed in breaking up, fragmenting the struggle along, so that it becomes an ethnic thing, and the leaders who are the problems, the parliamentarians, the president, would, if they don't succeed in making this about ethnicity, about religion, I think that would be a good thing. And then we come to Nigeria. As I said, the NSAS movement was a very encouraging movement for me. I actually was asked by a major newspaper to write about it, and I said to them that the best person to chronicle what was happening had to be a young person who was involved in the struggle. So I turned down the invitation to speak about it. But from the sidelines, I admired what happened. I admired the way in which young people from different ethnic backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, or no religious background, were able to come together and take up a challenge to the Nigerian state. And the ways in which they organized themselves, fed themselves, took care of the sick among themselves, cleaned up after themselves at the end of every day. They actually gave us a slight glimpse of the possibility of a Nigeria that works. But that struggle was I said, destroyed. So now we face in Nigeria times that continue to darken, times that continue to grow in gloominess, right? So we talk about companies that have left, and ShopRite has just announced, as I said earlier, the closure of their shop in Wuse Central Mall. We talk about even that governors, people who are part of the ruling class, the Akwa governor, Umar Eno, said, I think a couple of days ago, that 3 peppers, you have to spend 200 naira to buy 3 peppers. And as we know, Nigerians, especially from some ethnic groups, like to use a lot of pepper in cooking. People don't have that money, I mean, these are peppers, and these are very slim peppers he's talking about, right? Then there is gari, then there is tomatoes, there is, of course, people are no longer talking of even meat, and then the climate of insecurity in the country. Just in the last few days, a deputy vice chancellor at the Osmanu Danfodio University in Sokoto, a man named Yusuf Saidu, who was a deputy vice chancellor and a professor of biochemistry, was ambushed by bandits between Zamfara and Kaduna, and killed. I believe that his driver escaped with injuries, but the man was killed. So this is a scientist. This is a big, a high university administrator. This is the kind of talent that countries that are interested in development treasure, professor of biochemistry. And then we, again, in the last few days, I think a retired brigadier general, a man by the name of Uwem Udokwere, was stabbed to death in his own home by alleged armed robbers who went to his house in Sunshine Home Estate in Abuja. So this is the federal capital. This is a 70-year-old retired army general, brigadier general, and he's killed. We hear about student leaders who've been abducted in the country. So Nigeria continues to descend into darkness, into this grave disquiet.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, our leaders, their main concern now, one of their pressing concerns, is to purchase 2 more aircraft for the presidential fleet. We've been told that this is a priority. We've been told that the Nigerian president is being flown in jets that are 13 years old or so, or 19 years old, which the age of aircraft is nothing. But in a country where the minimum wage negotiations are still unresolved, even if the government were to double or triple the minimum wage in the country, is still highly inadequate. And of course, we do know that once there's a tripling of the minimum wage, there will be a quadrupling of the cost of living in Nigeria, because that's the way it goes. You know, you give workers a few naira, businesses will, add, a lot more in terms of what they charge for their goods and services. So things are really, really bleak in the country. And so the question is, are we going to see the kind of resistance that happened in Kenya? Are we going to witness it in Nigeria? Or have Nigerians become altogether complacent? Have they become so quiescent that, people are willing to accept their fate? And as Nigerians say, to throw their hands up in despair and say, God is in control. So I don't know. Every day, actually, I wake up saying, is Nigeria still quiet? I expect that that people who suffer as much as Nigerians have suffered would actually be quicker than Kenyans in standing up to the impunity of their political leaders.
Yeah, it's one of those things, man. One thing I forgot to add was even when Tinubu got elected, one of the first places he went to when he got back to Lagos was Elemulu's house, which they released the video too, actually. So
yeah,
it's right there. So anyway, I guess it's I said if it comes to Kenya, I can only see the similarities with Nigeria. I didn't really delve much into it. To me, it's just another case of Africanitis, I guess. Well, we all claim we all get here and claim victimhood. We wake up and say all our problems are from the West. Western countries are all our problems. Sometimes they are our problems, but most times it's just us. Pretty much, we hate each other more than anything else, and that's life. Just like you rightly said, it's people find it more enjoyable that their townsman is in power. Largely because you get to say your townsman is in power and your other guy is not in power. The other ethnic group doesn't have power. That largely it's, which if you see whether it's in history or any other all these written works, or most people, not everybody, but the majority of people when they write in Nigeria, they are essentially writing to own the other ethnic groups. Essentially, you read their stuff, it makes no sense. Not everybody again.
Yeah.
Most people though. But no need to tell you just how useless almost the entirety of it is. And then when people don't really read what they write in terms of stuff that they should deliver, not just generally. You're talking of like Nigerian history or Nigerian society and all those kind of things, where most people don't really read what they deliver because there's no substance to it. It just isn't any. So I was talking with a friend who was a good example. He was talking about what they call this guy, Maxiolu. So Maxiolu has a new book coming out. Like, yeah, Maxiolu really does really well with his stuff. It's like, yeah, Maxiolu doesn't make much money probably doing it, blah, blah, blah. This is my friend just finished his own PhD in history. And I was like, yeah. I was in traffic in Nigeria and I saw Maxiolu's books being sold in traffic. But that doesn't have anything to do with the final. If you're talking about the financial aspects of it, no, he has good financial distance from he has good whatever he's making from it. He has good financial distance from it primarily because he is going to get paid in so many ways, and it's primarily because he has substance. He has substance to what he's putting out. Not only is his writing style um, pretty enjoyable, but he also has actual substance to what he's putting out. So not just trying to own this thing, I guess that's why he also stays as Maxiolo and doesn't do too many interviews. He stays out of the ethnic this thing where people are going to question his motives and all those kind of things. So yeah, that's just that, man. That's but it's been interesting though. It's been interesting. I don't really have much to add in terms of that. So, but yeah.
Well, yeah. So I think we have to be watching and paying attention to our brethren in Kenya, and I really my heart goes out to them. I've gone to Kenya only once, and I look forward to going again. I have many friends from there, including the great writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o and his family. Friends with a bunch of them. I'm friends with other Kenyan writers, other Kenyan academics, and so on. So I really feel emotionally close to Kenya, and I my hope is that the young people in Kenya and the people of Kenya will come out of this crisis stronger, in a better place, with a better insight into what they must do in order to transform their lives, in order to recreate themselves. And I wish the same for us in Nigeria and for other African countries. So yeah, so take us home.
Yep. Well, it's been great having everybody. A little bit of technical difficulties today, but we look forward to having you guys on the next episode.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all.